Good evening, Dr. Gressick. Um, so, in light of our honors idea falling through, I decided to go all out anyway because I already had some ideas in my head. And so, you can count this as vlog six, sure, but it's also just kind of a bit of insight that I've been able to compile, especially after the reflective blogs in the W310 course, as well as the philosophies discussed, the educational philosophies discussed in Dr. Okrah's H340 class, which is Education and American Culture. And so, kind of tying all that together and seeing the history of educational philosophy, I think I've developed a very unique but very I would say realist perspective, not using it in a philosophical term, but just saying I think it's a very, very realistic approach when blending theory and practicality in the classroom. So it's philosophy as well as the tech integration that will be discussed here. So I'd like to start out that my personal philosophy is really a blend between two seemingly opposing philosophies, which are progressivism and perennialism. And progressivism is very much student-centered, teach to their needs, very much interest-centered in the students, and that's something I very much appreciate about that perspective, but I think it sometimes neglects some of the roots of perennialism, which is the very basic aspects of education, the three R's. Specifically, perennialism often includes moral and religious training, Greek and Latin myth, grammar, logic, and geometry, as well as liberal arts. As an English guy, some of those are very important to me, and in my personal life as a Christian, some are also important. But what I do disagree with, certainly in perennialism, is one, excessive religious inclusion in the classroom, because I believe that we're all seeking truth, not exactly that the teacher is kind of holds the corner on all truth, whether religious or other curriculum-centered ideas. You know what I'm trying to say. Uh, Also, it says that common curriculum for students is expected and that student interests are not relevant, and I wholeheartedly disagree with that. So due to my own religious persuasions, I would say that those moral teachings are important in my own life. And I fall into the philosophy known as neo-Thomism, which is blending very mystical beliefs with very practical, realist beliefs. Um, and, I believe that the very concept of God is an existence or a proof of his existence, but that doesn't imply that everyone on the earth will follow, and therefore, why would I in a public classroom ever espouse directly my religious beliefs? That's just something that neo-Thomism and perennialism share that even as a Christian I question. Um, and But I will say that I believe that I retain some aspects of perennialism as far as emphasizing the basic aspects of education, reading, writing, arithmetic, and the basic knowledge, the foundation needed to succeed academically in our society. And also, the majority of methods used by many of my teachers were perennialist. Um, the classical lectures don't faze me. I honestly enjoy them, um, and I would call myself a pretty well-rounded public speaker. But I've had students, or excuse me, I've had teachers who are very, very monotone and just I don't know, boring for lack of a better term. But I don't think that you need to wholeheartedly throw away the lecture model. I just don't think lectures need to be bland, disengaging speeches. I hope to use vocal control, real world examples relevant to student interest, which is where the progressivist part starts to come in, as well as my out of class relationships with students and a casual temperament in class in order to engage them in my lectures. And I will say, though, I will admit that despite lecture being my instinctual mode of instruction, I believe that perennialism will inform a predominantly progressive approach to education. So the foundation, it's kind of flipped as far as my approach. My foundation is progressive, wanting to cater to student needs, but I'll probably do that in a methodologically perennialist way. Um, I believe that experience-based methods can teach students as much, if not more, than in-class lectures, but students must be willing to engage and participate heavily in these tasks and the academic side of these tasks. I know sometimes in science labs, I would not learn a lot. The cool experiment happened, but I wouldn't learn very deeply as far as the academic side. And so I'm resistant to full-blown project-based learning, despite my experience in your class, which I think it was used very effectively in, because I understand that the practical side of it has merit as far as teaching students to use technology, because that's where our society is. However, I believe it also ignores, or can ignore at times, I don't think yours does, but it can ignore conventions taught in other courses, or if it's used in place of teaching conventions basics. I think that's definitely terrible. I find that implementing technology prematurely in the process of teaching these basics sometimes can hinder progress. I spoke with a fourth grade teacher, and I may have mentioned this in a different vlog as well, from my own elementary school, named Justine Krylo. And what she mentioned was that her students were provided with it's not full one-to-one, but they're provided with a lot of technological opportunities in class. And she said, and she's been a teacher for 20 years, I had her in fourth grade and she was there before that. She said that student innovation has really dropped. And so I believe that we need to use perennialism to encourage a basic content understanding, and use technologies then to help students apply it, because that builds them towards real world application, because technology is all over our world. And as a side note, I don't have a problem with using media as text to analyze in literature, but we also need to encourage student innovation prior to handing them technology. It offers them an opportunity, technology does, to kind of check out and assume that others have already completed the projects. They already have the corner on knowledge, which is very, again, perennialist. And that's the side of me that the progressivist comes out. Just as I don't believe that students are the tabula rasa, the blank slate, kids who should simply accept my curriculum, my beliefs as a teacher as truth, I don't believe that they should be given, quote unquote, the keys to the kingdom before they understand how the kingdom works. So why would we allow them to implement technology before they, one, know how to use the technology, and two, know how to use the technology well to apply basic curriculum that they learned prior? One real world example is one of my high school math teachers was not hesitant about showing us shortcuts on the calculator to show us how to basically shortcut math problems. And you'd think that would be counterintuitive, but he'd spend days upon days prior to showing us these explaining the very roots of the problem-solving process. And once our class had mastered the practical, on-paper, basic methodology and could solve it ourselves, he gave us the shortcut in order for us to easily build more information in. And so that kind of shows a mix between that basic center and very classical rote learning and on-paper learning, literally rote learning, and modern technology. And so in my own classroom, in conclusion, I hope to teach basics, but then introduce technology as a way of application, and also, whether that's building on specific new content or whether it's building on class content taught in previous courses and just encouraging critical thinking and engagement. So if technology is used for those two purposes, I think it's absolutely wonderful. But when technology is implemented too early, I believe it can be a detriment to student cognitive development, and I think I've given at least one practical example here to prove why. So yeah, I hope that my 10-minute monologue wasn't too much for you, and I hope you found it thoughtful. Thanks for a great semester.